The 9 days of mourning for Pope Francis have come to an end. While the entire world turns its eyes toward the Vatican, waiting for white smoke to rise and a name to be proclaimed under the heavens, the holiness the Church longs for wavers like a candle flickering in the winds of the world. As millions of souls direct their hearts toward Rome with hope, elsewhere, a president ruler of a powerful nation mocks this sacred moment. You know who it is, don't you? President Donald Trump. And he himself posted a photo of him seated on the papal throne, draped in white robes like the Pope. But here's what you need to know: it wasn't just a joke. It wasn't harmless satire. The truth behind that image is darker than you think. And a nun who had crossed the threshold between life and death witnessed the truth with her own soul. What did she see? Who will be the one to inherit the chair of St. Peter? Don't look away. Because if you miss even one detail, your entire understanding may be distorted, and that misunderstanding could cost you the final light. This testimony has not been refuted by the Church, despite its cautious stance on such revelations. And Eternal Bible Stories is the only YouTube channel privileged to share this extraordinary message with the world. Before we begin, please leave your name and the city you live in. We want to pray for you, to speak your name before the Lord and stand united in faith together. If this story stirs your soul, we invite you to join in the sacred work God is doing through Eternal Bible Stories. By clicking the Super Thanks button below the video, the heart icon, you're sending a financial gift that helps us continue spreading light and truth to thousands more. We are deeply grateful, and we believe God will remember that offering. He will return it to you many times over for the heart you've sown in faith. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, click now to help us share God's love and light with the world. Now listen closely to the testimony of this nun. Have you ever stood at the edge of a moment when everything you knew suddenly felt fragile, as if a single breath could shatter the entire world? I never thought I would face something like that until a cold winter afternoon, when the light I once believed to be eternal suddenly dimmed. I am Sister Phoebe, a contemplative nun living in a small monastery nestled within the pine forests of New England. Here the soft sound of snow falling on the roof can make you forget the world, and the mist-covered woods are where I have often found God in stillness. My life was a rhythm of silent prayers, the chapel bells calling me each morning, and hands worn rough from tending the little garden behind the cloister. But that Wednesday afternoon, everything changed. It was bitterly cold. My breath turned to white mist as I stepped out of the chapel after prayer. The sky hung heavy and grey, threatening snow. Mother Superior had asked me to bring some food and warm blankets to a poor family living at the edge of the village, a few miles through the forest. God dwells in small things, Phoebe, she said, her eyes gentle yet firm. I nodded, wrapped myself in a thick woolen cloak, tied a scarf around my neck, and hoisted the heavy basket onto my shoulder. Just before leaving the monastery, I caught a snippet of a radio broadcast from the old kitchen, set a powerful man's voice, mocking, "Nuns do nothing but pray useless." The words, fleeting as they were, scraped against my heart like cold wind and sowed a seed of unease. The trail through the woods was as familiar to me as the lines on my hands. Yet that day, something made me shiver, and not just from the cold. I walked on, my worn shoes brushing the frost-covered earth, each step crunching with a dry, brittle sound. The pine forest was silent, save for the wind and the steady beat of my heart, like a sacred hymn. I thought of those nights kneeling in prayer, when the golden candlelight warmed my soul and I felt God so close. I thought of the people I was about to help, a widowed mother and her 3 children, living in a dilapidated wooden house. I smiled, imagining their grateful eyes, and reminded myself this was exactly why I chose this life, to bring the light of God into the darkest corners. But then, halfway through the path, a strange sensation swept over me. It wasn't pain, nor exhaustion, it was a hollow emptiness, as if my soul had been pulled from my body. I stopped and leaned against a pine tree, my breath quick and shallow. The sky suddenly darkened, and black clouds rolled in like crashing waves. I heard something knock the wind, not forest creatures, but a deep sound like a call from an unseen realm. My heart pounded not out of fear, but because I could feel a presence, powerful and unfamiliar, surrounding me. I tried to keep walking, but my legs felt like lead. The basket slipped from my hand, toppling onto the ground. I knelt down not to pick it up, but because I could no longer stand. "Lord, what is happening?" I whispered, my voice trembling. There was no answer, only the howl of the wind. And then a wave of dizziness swept over me, and I collapsed onto the cold forest floor. Everything faded. No pain, no radiant light like the stories people tell of heaven. Only a vast silence, cold, wide and empty, as if I had fallen into a bottomless abyss. I didn't know where I was, but I knew I had left life behind. I saw my body, lying motionless on the bed of pine needles, from a strange angle, almost as if I were floating above. My woolen cloak spread out like broken wings, my scarf loosened, revealing my prematurely silver hair. No one was there, no nurse, no shouts for help, only the silent forest and the grey, cold sky. But then, in the distance, I heard footsteps pounding the earth, as if someone was approaching. I tried to call out, tried to reach for my body, but I was powerless, like a ghost without weight. My heart, or whatever was left of it in my soul, cried out, "Lord, where are you?" I had lived my whole life for him, nights spent kneeling in prayer until my knees burned, days quietly offering myself in the garden and the chapel. Why didn't he come? Why was I so utterly alone? Then, like a veil torn in two, a warm light pulled me away. It wasn't the light of the sun, it was a living light, as if God's own love was wrapping itself around me. I didn't walk, but I moved lightly, like a bird gliding on the wind. I no longer had a body, but I was still me, more clearly, more vividly than ever before. A new world opened up, a realm where the light came from nowhere, and yet it came from a presence I had never seen, but had longed for all my life. Where was I going? What was waiting for me ahead? And why? In the very moment I brushed against death, did I feel more alive than I ever had before. If heaven is real, what does it look like through your eyes? For me, while I was still on earth, I often imagined an endless paradise, vast green meadows, where angelic choirs sang like streams flowing over stones. I pictured crystal domes and rivers of brilliant gold. But all those images shattered completely the moment I was pulled into that place, not by foot, but by soul. A force I could not resist carried me beyond all concepts of time, space, and even self. I didn't arrive in heaven. I was swallowed by it. Light surrounded me, not the blinding light that dazzles human eyes, but a gentle stream of radiance, like golden silk threads dissolving every trace of sorrow. This light wasn't just visible, it could be felt. It wrapped around me like a mother reuniting with her long-lost child after centuries apart. I was no longer flesh. I was a complete soul. No fear, only a deep, serene peace so profound that I realized I had never truly known peace until that moment. There was no time, no direction. I wasn't falling or flying, I was melting into eternal light. Each ray of light felt like a wave of language, speaking love without words, without sound, only presence. I knew I was home. Not the monastery, not the world, but the very place my soul had longed to return to for as long as it had existed. And then he appeared. There were no footsteps, no warning. But suddenly the light ahead began to shift as if it were parting a veil to make way for the Most High. He didn't emerge from darkness, there was no darkness here, but the light became him. It was light in form, not thin like sunlight, but thick, alive, pulsing. He was towering, yet not terrifying. The radiance around him wasn't like the sun, it was more like a cloak woven from the breath of eternity. He wore a robe of pure white, with a deep crimson sheen at the hem like blood, but unsullied. His face resembled no image I had ever seen, not Western, not Middle Eastern, not old, not young, but a perfect convergence of every holy beauty that has ever existed. His eyes emitted a strange light, not only seeing through me, but lifting me from within. And then he spoke my name. Phoebe. It wasn't spoken aloud, yet his voice flowed through my soul like a wave of warmth. No sound echoed in the air, but I heard it more clearly than any word I had ever known. Each syllable touched me like a note composed specifically for my heart. You have returned. I didn't cry with tears. I cried with the fullness of my being. Every sorrow buried in my soul cracked and dissolved. Every doubt, every fear vanished, all at once. I felt love, but not the earthly kind, the kind wrapped in conditions and wounds. This was love in its purest form, sacred, eternal, unshakable. I wanted to embrace him. I wanted to melt into that light forever. But then he spoke again, and his words pierced through me like a blade, not to wound, but to awaken. It is not yet time for you to stay. I froze. Confusion washed over me. Why? Why did he call me, show me heaven, cradle my soul in his own light only to send me back? I was here in eternity, in my true home. He did not answer with reason. Instead, he reached out his hand, a simple gesture, yet one powerful enough to tear through every veil of illusion. And as his hand extended, the space before me opened wide, not like a door, but like a field of light being torn open by love itself. Beyond the veil was a vision that surpassed every library, every palace, a vast moving network of living light, breathing, glowing, woven like a galaxy. Each thread of light was a path, a choice, a story flowing like the bloodstream of the sacred realm. This is the place where truth is kept, he said, and this time his voice was no longer a whisper, but the sound of eternal understanding. Not as man has told it, but as it truly is. I trembled. That truth, what was it? Why must I see it? And why me? He didn't force me to step forward, but his eyes, the eyes of the one who had been crucified, who had loved even those who crucified him, told me, you will not be the same once you know this. And so I stepped forward. I used to believe the church was an everlasting lamp, illuminating even the darkest nights. But in my first vision, I witnessed a truth that made my soul tremble, as if I were watching the heart of Christ being torn apart. The space around me shifted. The gentle light of heaven gave way to a crimson field, like dried blood beneath a sunset sky. The wind blew through, carrying the scent of burning and ash, scraping across my senses. At the center of the field stood a towering structure of white stone, ancient and breathtakingly beautiful. I recognized it instantly. It was the church, the symbol of purity, the place I had given my entire life to. But as I stepped closer, a weight pressed down on my chest. Tiny, almost invisible cracks ran along the stone walls. From them seeped a thick black liquid, not blood, but something like toxic tar, emitting a foul and bitter stench. I reached out to touch it and was pulled into a whirlwind of memories that did not belong to me. Before my eyes, images flashed like sharpened blades. I saw hands in the shadows, adorned with glimmering gold rings, signing deals with men in black suits whose eyes were cold as steel. A screen lit up inside a stone chamber, displaying the face of a prideful man. The words, "Let me lead," blinked below, like a seductive invitation for worldly power to infiltrate what was once sacred. The secret meetings continued. Flickering candlelight could not reveal the depths of greed. I heard whispers, promises of power, money, survival exchange for betrayal of the faith. I saw souls trying to resist. A young priest, his face wet with tears, knelt before the altar, pleading with God to save the church from those who led it. But his voice was silenced, labeled a rebel. I saw nameless martyrs, their mouths bound, condemned as heretics, though their hearts burned with truth. Each image struck me like a blade to the chest. I collapsed onto the crimson field, tears streaming not from despair, but because I could feel the sorrow of Christ. He loved the church as a bridegroom loves his bride, and yet it was those who had sworn fidelity to him that had allowed darkness to seep in through the cracks of pride, fear, and selfishness. I remembered the nights I knelt in the monastery, beneath candlelight, praying for the church, never knowing it was fracturing. The times I kissed the crucifix, believing that all I did was in service to the light. Now, standing before the white stone building, I felt small, naive and powerless. But I couldn't look away. The black liquid continued to ooze, spreading as if to consume the entire structure. I wanted to scream, to run and seal the cracks with my own hands, but my soul only hovered watching. Then a voice rang out, not from outside, but from deep within me. "What do you see, Phoebe?" It was Jesus. His voice was gentle, yet sharp like a sword slicing through pain. I didn't answer. I only wept. He did not rebuke me. He simply placed his hand on my shoulder, and I felt warmth like light entering a heart that was breaking. "This is not the end," he said, "but you must see to understand." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I had the strength. Have you ever wondered where darkness truly begins, not in the world, but in the soul? After witnessing the cracks in the white stone building, I thought I had seen the depths of betrayal. But the next vision pulled me deeper into a place without light, only biting cold, like the moment I collapsed in the pine forest of New England. The space around me crumbled, replaced by an endless abyss where the air felt heavy as lead, thick with the scent of damp earth and forgotten memories. I hovered weightless, yet burdened by the weight of thousands of years of suffering. Before me, an ancient tree appeared. Its roots plunged deep into the blackened soil, its twisted trunk deformed, and dry, skeletal branches stretched upward like hands begging for help. This was not the tree of life, it was the tree of division. Each root marked a moment when humanity turned its back on God. I saw images flash by, an ancient man in a torn cloak choosing power over love, sowing the first seeds of pride. A weeping prophetess, eyes filled with tears, was cast out by her people for speaking the truth. A king with a gleaming crown built temples for false idols, leading his nation astray. Each choice became a drop of black resin, feeding the tree, its roots spreading, reaching into my own time, into the very hands that signed secret agreements in the shadows, the ones I had seen before. I trembled not from the cold, but because I realized darkness does not begin outside of us. It begins in the human heart, in those moments when we choose ease over sacrifice, fear over faith. The ancient tree whispered not with words, but with the pain of millions of lost souls. "We don't need to destroy," it said. "We only need to make them forget." I wanted to look away, but Jesus appeared, his light slicing through the abyss like fire. "Phoebe, what do you see?" he asked, his voice gentle, yet sharp. I whispered, "The beginning of all wandering." He nodded, his eyes sorrowful, yet resolute. "Darkness begins with a choice, but so does light." The withered branches quivered, as if trying to drag me into the abyss. I reached for his light, but my heart felt heavy. A single drop of black resin fell, igniting in flame before it touched the ground, as if to warn me, the darkness is still growing, and I have not yet seen it all. If this world is a chessboard, who stands behind the moves? The second vision drew me into a cold reality, where truth was distorted like light through a shattered prism. Before me appeared an invisible network, not visible to the natural eye, but radiant within the realm of the soul. Fragile threads of light, like the nervous system of a colossal creature, stretched across continents, weaving through dazzling cities and desolate wastelands. They connected financial centers to gleaming glass towers, government headquarters to cold stone corridors, media empires to screens that never turned off. But what chilled me to the core were the threads that led to religious buildings, churches, cathedrals, sacred places where I once believed only light could dwell. At each node of the network, shadowy figures emerged. They had no faces, only outlines cloaked in darkness, robes flowing like liquid night. They stood still, silent, yet every movement they made controlled puppets below, puppets with human faces, speaking human words, but acting as if pulled by strings. Among them stood one figure more prominent than the rest, dressed in a deep blue suit, his voice echoing with magnetic charm, promising order and glory. But a thread from the shadows tugged hard, twisting his words into tools of deception, drawing humanity away from the light of God. These puppets, in turn, controlled millions more through televised speeches, through policies passed in the dark, and most frightening of all, through doctrines that were once holy but now distorted to serve another purpose. I saw believers, people like me, kneeling in churches, thinking they were worshipping God, unknowingly offering their prayers to a system that did not belong to the light. I was horrified. The unseen legs of my soul felt as if they might collapse beneath me. How could the church, the lamp I believed was eternal, be drawn into this web? I remembered the mornings in the monastery when sunlight streamed through stained glass, and I felt God so close. Now all I saw was deception so intricate it had blinded the world. I wanted to flee, but Jesus appeared. His gaze was gentle, yet unwavering. "You need to see this, Phoebe," he said, his voice like a breeze calming the storm within me. "Not all light comes from me." I shuddered, suddenly realizing how many times had I trusted in what merely glittered, never knowing it was leading me astray. The third vision came not like a storm, but like a thin black mist weaving its way into the light I was immersed in. It was gentle, smooth, almost tender, yet it made me tremble to my core. The space around me blurred. Light filtered through a dense fog, as though reality itself was dissolving. Each breath I took felt heavy, as if I were inhaling the ashes of burned dreams. Then, in the midst of the twilight, a form appeared. It was not human, not beast, not a demon from legend. It was a swirling mass of energy, millions of fragments of thought, memory, desire, and ambition fused together. As if all of humanity's lostness had been drawn into one place, coalescing into an ancient consciousness, alive long before time had a name, before good and evil had words to define them. I knew immediately, the Faceless One. It didn't need words. Its presence whispered into my mind like a deadly lullaby. Smooth, compelling ideas full of reason, freedom, equality, a new morality, a world without division. It sounded noble, even human, like the very dreams I had once whispered in prayers for peace. But then, each piece of truth dissolved like salt into black water. "We don't need to destroy the church," it said, its voice as silky as velvet but cold as ice. "We only need to make it a hollow symbol, a place where people come to be accepted, but never transformed, where mercy hides the truth and love legitimizes everything." I couldn't breathe. My throat felt strangled. The Faceless One required no blood, no fire. It only needed us to forget our roots, forget the light, forget who we are. I saw its strategy not to scream from the darkness, but to whisper within false light. Those it chose bore no horns or tails. They were captivating, beloved educators with mesmerizing lectures, politicians with promises of change, artists whose works stirred the heart, and even those within the church, standing at pulpits with warm smiles. They didn't know they were being used, and that was what made them dangerous. Some meant well, others chased fame, but all were serving the Faceless One, silently rewriting what it meant to be good. I saw secret meetings in rooms without light, where words like progress, inclusion, and global consensus were repeated like mantras. I saw documents being drafted, media campaigns carefully planned, all with one goal: to make humanity believe it no longer needed salvation, that sin was just a personal choice, that grace could be replaced with self-empowerment. Christ, once the center of all life, was fading behind hollow, universal slogans like light eclipsed by dark clouds. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run back to the arms of Jesus, but I knew he wanted me to see this, not to frighten me, but to awaken me. The enemy was not out there, hidden in old demonic symbols. It was in the human heart, in apathy, in compromise, in complacency. A strong church does not fear attack, but a compromising church will rot from within. After facing the Faceless One, I thought I understood manipulation. But this vision took me somewhere else, not into networks of power, but into narrow paths, village churches, where ordinary believers prayed. The space was dim, as if light had been filtered through broken glass, carrying the chill of winter, like the cold I felt when I lay on the forest floor. I saw thousands of people, their faces faint, standing in churches, clutching rosary beads, lips murmuring prayers. But then, a thin stream of smoke, black as ink, slipped through the door cracks and wrapped around them. No one saw it, but I felt it. It was draining hope, faith like vapor scorched by the sun. I saw a mother, eyes swollen with tears, praying for her sick child, but the smoke whispered, "God isn't listening." She let go of the rosary, her gaze empty. A young man, shirt wrinkled, knelt asking for direction. But the smoke said, "You're enough on your own." He stood up and walked out of the church without ever returning. Each soul was a candle extinguished not by flame, but by doubt and apathy, sown by the lies from the network I had seen before. I screamed, trying to warn them, but my voice vanished into the smoke. I saw priests, nuns, trying to hold them back, but even they wavered, their eyes clouded by confusion over the new teachings from the Vatican. The cold of darkness soaked into me, like snow piercing through my cloak. Jesus appeared, his hand touching a weeping believer. "They are mine," he said. "Even when darkness clouds their sight, I still call to them." I wept not from despair, but because I saw, though the black smoke spread, there were still souls that could not be stolen, candles that still burned. The black smoke gathered, forming a vague figure, trying to swallow me. But the light from the small candles pushed it back. I stood there in silence, knowing this battle wasn't over and I had to carry that light farther. Have you ever felt your faith tremble, as if God had drawn away? If your heart is hurting, leave a comment below. Did you know that writing down your struggles can help you process them more clearly? And here I am in this community, ready to listen and help you speak through it all. Can a holy throne be seized by the very ones who swore to protect it? I trembled as the next vision struck, pulling me into St. Peter's Square. But this was no longer the magnificent dream it used to be. The air was thick, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. The light was pale, as though drained by some invisible force. Thousands of people crowded together, their eyes fixed on the small chimney atop the Sistine Chapel. Whispers spread, then fell silent. A thin white plume of smoke rose into the air. The crowd erupted cheers like crashing waves, eyes glistening with hope, hands embracing, knees falling to kiss the cold stone ground. Church bells rang throughout Rome, as if trying to awaken the entire world. But just before the white smoke rose, I saw something that chilled me to the core. A man in a deep blue suit stood in front of the Sistine Chapel, snapping a selfie with a proud, smug grin. He posted it online with the caption, "This place needs me more." The crowd outside, though awaiting a sacred moment, laughed out loud, sharing the image like it was a harmless joke. But that laughter, like snowfall over the forests of New England, veiled the sacred and pierced my heart. My spirit froze. From behind the rising smoke, a cold wind slithered forth something that didn't belong in this place. It gripped me, as if even God's light had been eclipsed. The vision pulled me into the conclave of Cardinals, where truth had been twisted. I wandered into a sealed room, candlelight flickering against dark crimson vestments like dried blood under a dying sun. The scent of beeswax and old wood filled the suffocating air, mingling with the acrid odor of hidden schemes. The cardinals sat around a long table, their faces half lit by the hazy glow of high windows. Some bowed their heads, brows furrowed, whispering prayers. Others pressed their lips together, their eyes darting like players in a high-stakes game of power. The atmosphere was not sacred, but tense like a council determining the fate of the world. Then, among the rows of seats, a figure stunned me. The man I had seen in previous visions, the one with the arrogant smile on the screen, the one who promised to lead with a worldly power, was none other than Donald Trump. He stood there in a sharp, deep blue suit, his blazing red tie like a streak of fire, standing out amid the sea of dark red robes. I remembered the social media post from a few weeks earlier. He smiled beside the chimney in St. Peter's Square with the cheeky caption, "I want to be Pope." Millions had shared it, laughed loudly, dismissing it as a harmless joke from a man who always knew how to draw attention. But in the vision, I saw the truth. It was no joke, but a bait for power, a meticulously calculated prelude. A group of cardinals with eyes like sharpened blades were exploiting his appeal, the familiar face on television, the man who promised prosperity and order through fiery speeches. They wanted the crowd outside, the millions waiting to believe that the new pope, tied to the image of Trump, would lead the church like a powerful head of state, bringing renewal and glory. But I saw it clearly. Trump was not the one chosen to be pope. He was a decoy, a crafted symbol designed to distract, to conceal the darkness creeping in. I looked more closely. A group of younger cardinals, eyes gleaming with cunning, gathered in the corner of the room. They spoke no words, but their eyes shifted from Trump to another hidden point, then nodded slowly, as if everything had been planned long ago. The older cardinals, hands trembling as they held their ballots, murmured prayers, seemingly blind to the scheme. Trump stood still, his cold gaze scanning the room. There was no prayer, no sign of faith, only calculation, like a businessman assessing a multi-billion-dollar deal. As the final vote dropped into the box, the soft rustle of paper echoed like a whisper from the shadows. I wanted to scream, to warn them, but my soul floated helplessly above it all. A spiritual fog filled the chamber, dulling minds, tipping the balance with invisible pressure. I saw the cardinals hesitate, their eyes flickering as if guided by an unseen force. The result was announced. White smoke rose. I was cast out into the square, where the applause roared like a storm. The crowd cheered, shouting Habemus Papam through tears. They weren't just joyful for a new pope, they were swept up in the image of Trump, the man they believed, through viral social media posts, would bring strength to the church. They shared his quotes, convinced that someone so strong would save the world. But I knew it was a false belief, orchestrated to deceive. The white curtain on the central balcony was drawn slowly aside, the rustle of fabric like the final whisper of truth. The new pope stepped out, a man of medium build, dressed in immaculate white, his movements slow but deliberate. He smiled, a smile precisely calculated, not too warm, not too cold. His eyes swept over the crowd, but did not connect, as though looking through them to measure their reaction. His voice rang out warm, full, each word pronounced as though it had been practiced for hours. He spoke of reconciliation, of a united world, of love that transcends all boundaries. His words were beautiful like poetry, but empty like a play missing the breath of God. I wanted to believe, I wanted to feel the light, but my heart felt only cold, as though standing before a wall of ice. Then I saw them, figures in the shadows behind the balcony, like puppets being pulled by backstage strings. They wore no liturgical garments, bore no sacred symbols. Some wore long black cloaks that flowed like night. Others were dressed plainly, blending in with the crowd. Their eyes were cold as glass, glinting with triumph. One turned to another and nodded slightly. No words were spoken, but I knew the performance had begun. Trump did not stand on the balcony, but his image had done its job, distracting, blinding the crowd from the truth, making them believe that renewal was coming. A voiceless message pierced my soul, not angry, not hateful, but sharp as a blade. This one does not serve the light. He has been chosen. The throne has been seized. I was stunned. The cheers of "Long live the Pope" now rang in my ears like the mocking laughter of a staged illusion. I wanted to cry, not for him, not for Trump, but for the innocent souls out there, those who had placed all their faith in this moment. They could not see that the throne had been veiled in an invisible dust, could not see that Trump was merely a piece in a manipulative scheme, a dazzling symbol used to mask the darkness. I turned, searching for Jesus. He was not on the balcony, not in the crowd. He stood behind me, his gaze deep and sorrowful. I saw him place his hand on the shoulder of a pilgrim who knelt weeping with joy, unaware of the truth unfolding. He whispered to that soul, not with words, but with grace, like a gentle breeze brushing through the spirit. I understood, though the throne had been taken, grace could still slip into humble hearts. Have you ever rejoiced in a moment only to feel unease creeping in? If your heart is trembling, don't push it away. Truth is waiting to be uncovered. But what happens when the most beautiful words turn out to be lies? I wasn't ready, but I had to face it. Before the vision of the conclave pulled me into St. Peter's Square, a wave of invisible power swept over me, drawing my soul into a place not of this world. I found myself floating within an ancient library, not of men, but of the sacred realm. Towering oak shelves carved with mysterious patterns stretched endlessly, as if reaching toward an invisible sky. The dust of time hovered in the air, glimmering under the dim glow of thousands of scrolls, each radiating a soft light, like a candle that never goes out. The air was cold, like the pine forest in New England the day I collapsed, but it carried the scent of aged paper, dried ink, and half-burned beeswax, an aroma so sacred it made my heart pound. I did not walk, but drifted, my soul weightless, like a bird gliding through wind. A strange sensation rose within me, all mixed with fear, as though I were touching the secrets of the universe. The wind rustled between the shelves, faint like the whispers of ancient souls. The scrolls shimmered, strange characters glowing across their surfaces, not human writing, but living light telling stories beyond time. I longed to touch them all, to understand, but an unseen force drew me toward one specific scroll, more radiant than the rest, resting on a cold stone pedestal. Its light was powerful, but the edges were scorched, as if fire had intentionally tried to destroy it. The charred black marks spread like the hand of darkness reaching to erase the truth. I trembled as the invisible hand of my soul touched the scroll. A warm light wrapped around me, then burst into thousands of images like blades slicing through the night. I saw a cave deep underground, its damp stone walls glimmering in flickering torchlight. The scent of earth and smoke filled my nose, merging with a bone-deep chill. A group of people, cloaked in black robes that flowed like darkness itself, gathered around a rough stone table. Their eyes were cold, not with the light of faith, but with the gleam of sharpened steel, full of calculation. They whispered, their voices hissing like serpents, speaking of a dark plan. We need a pope who does not serve God, but serves the new order. I saw their hands adorned with silver rings engraved with strange symbols, exchanging forged parchment scrolls bearing desecrated holy seals. A letter bearing the Vatican seal was torn apart, its ink-smeared text defaced. An ancient prophetic scroll, its light dim, was thrown into a strange blue flame, its ashes rising like burned souls. I wanted to scream, to stop them, but my soul was powerless, only a witness. The images continued, clearer now. I saw true prophecies being burned, flames licking the edges of paper, leaving behind ash that shimmered like falling stars. A voice rang out, not from the group, but from the scroll I had touched. It came from the depths, echoing from an unseen realm. The one who is chosen will wear white, but his heart belongs to darkness. He will speak of love, but lead souls astray. The words pierced me like a cold blade, making my soul tremble. I realized this was the preparation for what I would later witness, the white smoke rising in St. Peter's Square, the throne that had been seized. My heart ached, as though being squeezed. I thought of the church I loved, those nights kneeling in the monastery, golden candlelight illuminating the scriptures, the rosary beads slipping through my fingers. How could such holiness be manipulated? How could those sworn to serve God betray Him? I wanted to turn away, to return to the eternal light, but the scroll still glowed, as if urging me to see it all. I saw forged documents being sent out, letters stolen from the Vatican, and true prophecies buried beneath the ashes. Each of their acts was like another crack in the white stone building I had seen in a previous vision, allowing the darkness to spread. Then, in the cold, a warmth touched me like a small flame in a storm. I looked up and saw Him, Jesus, standing before the stone pedestal, light radiating from Him gently, like a flame that never dies. His robe was white, but marked with dust and small tears, as if He had walked through every suffering of mankind. His eyes were deep, piercing through time, filled with sorrow yet steadfast. He did not speak immediately. He placed His hand upon the scorched scroll. Where He touched it, light burst forth, banishing the burn marks, as though truth could never be destroyed. I trembled. Invisible tears fell, not from fear, but because I felt His love stronger than any darkness. Phoebe, His voice resounded not in sound, but as a warm wave through my soul. Truth is never lost. His words were sharp, yet tender, like a sword wrapped in love. Though they hide it, I still speak through humbleness. The scroll blazed with light, and its radiance engraved His words into me like fire branding wood. I wanted to speak, to say that I wasn't strong enough, that I was just a simple nun living among pine trees, with calloused hands and a heart full of doubt. But he smiled, not a smile of comfort, but one that lit a flame inside me. "You have seen because you are chosen," he said, and the light from him wrapped around me like the arms of a father. I stood there in the sacred library, the weight of truth pressing upon my soul. It was like fire, both illuminating and consuming. I thought of the nights in the monastery when I kissed the crucifix, believing the church to be an unshakable lamp. Now I knew that lamp was flickering, but the light of God would never go out. I whispered "Amen" as a vow to him and to myself. The vision faded, the library dissolved, but his words still echoed within me, leading me toward the next trial. "Tell me, how do you feel after hearing this? When truth is hidden, do you dare to seek it? If your heart is trembling, listen to it, or comment Amen to declare that the light will always triumph." After seeing Trump seated among the Cardinals in the conclave, I believed I had witnessed the height of spiritual deception. A world leader, entering sacred ground with pride rather than reverence, symbolized a disturbing merger between worldly power and holy office. But what came next was not about politics or influence. It was about the soul, about mine. I was taken inward, far deeper than thought or memory. I stood in a frozen field beneath a heavy grey sky. The snow was untouched, yet the silence was suffocating. No trees, no paths, only wind that screamed like sorrow and cold that pierced beyond flesh. In the center stood a towering mirror, immense and unmoving, reflecting not just my image but my essence. When I looked into it, I did not see Sister Phoebe in her familiar robes. I saw a soul laid bare, trembling, unguarded, and utterly exposed. Behind me, a figure formed. Trump again, but not as a man. He appeared as a force, a symbol of unchecked ambition, charm without truth, power without wisdom. His expression was void of hatred or mercy, just indifference. He had become something more than a man. He was now a warning. I tried to look away, but the mirror would not allow it. Visions unfolded before me. I saw myself in the chapel, praying for godly leaders, pleading with heaven for righteous rulers. I remembered the faith of my youth, pure, hopeful, almost naive. I saw how I had mistaken charisma for calling, how easily the church had begun to drift. The cracks had started small, harmless at first, until compromise replaced discernment, and the world crept into the sanctuary disguised as light. Tears welled up, not for him but for myself, for believing so blindly, for trusting appearances over substance. The mirror whispered a question, quiet but unrelenting: "Will you speak, or will you remain silent?" My mind raced to the monastery. I imagined the sisters, their eyes uncertain. Some would understand, others would not. I thought of the hierarchy, how much effort was spent protecting image rather than truth. If I spoke, would I be dismissed, disgraced, labeled a heretic? The risk was real, and yet the question still pressed against my soul. Then warmth touched the ground beneath my feet. I turned. Jesus stood before me. He did not come in lightning or fire. He came in stillness, clothed in radiant humility. His eyes met mine, filled with sorrow and strength. Without speaking, he absorbed the weight I could no longer carry. Then his voice entered me, deeper than sound: "Phoebe, truth is a burden, but it is also a grace." My knees buckled. I felt the grief, the responsibility, the call. He walked to the mirror and placed his hand upon it. Light spread like veins across the glass. The surface cracked and then dissolved, the shards falling like glowing snow, vanishing as they touched the ground. No pain, no punishment, only release. I breathed again. The cold still surrounded me, but it no longer held power over my soul. I turned to Jesus. His silence said what words could not. He had lived this burden. He knew the price of truth. Still, he looked at me with steady compassion and said, "You do not carry it alone." That was enough. The vision faded, but the fire remained. I would awaken with trembling limbs, yet I knew something inside me had changed. What I had seen was not just revelation, it was responsibility. A call to speak when silence might seem easier. A call to stand even if no one stood beside me. I did not know who would listen. I did not know what it would cost. But I had seen behind the veil. And now I must speak. The next vision pulled me back to St. Peter's Square, but it was no longer a place of hope. The air was heavy, carrying the scent of half-burnt incense and dust rising from the massive crowd. The church bells rang not bright and joyful, but dull and heavy, as if warning of an approaching storm. On the high balcony, the new pope stood, his robe pure white, but the light that shone from him was not from God. He raised his hand, his gesture slow and deliberate, like a seasoned actor. The crowd fell silent, millions of eyes fixed on him, awaiting the words that would shape the future of the church. "Dear brothers and sisters," his voice rang out deep, warm, each syllable carefully crafted to captivate. "We are entering a new era, an age of peace, unity, and love that transcends all boundaries. The church must adapt, cast off outdated prejudices, and become a beacon for all of humanity." He smiled, a flawless smile, but cold, like a frozen lake beneath moonlight. He spoke of one human family, of erasing religious boundaries, of a new gospel that no longer needed the old doctrines. Each word sparkled like pearls, but when they touched my soul, they dissolved empty, void of the breath of God. The crowd erupted. Applause rolled like waves, cries of Holy Father echoed through the square and across screens around the world. I saw tears glisten on their faces, hands gripping each other tightly, knees pressing into the cold stone. They believed. They longed for a better world, and his words like a lullaby swept them into an artificial dream. But my heart tightened, as though squeezed by an invisible hand. I remembered the nights kneeling in the monastery, golden candlelight illuminating the scriptures, where I felt true peace. Now, that peace had vanished, replaced by a bitter cold like snow cutting through a cloak in the New England woods. I looked deeper and saw division creeping in, not by sword, but by invisible fractures. In monasteries, priests whispered in trembling voices, "How can we discard doctrine?" One young priest asked, clutching his rosary. "This is the word of God." But another, eyes weary, replied, "We must adapt, or the church will be forgotten." In village churches, the faithful wavered. A mother, sleeves worn thin, left the church murmuring, "If sin is just a choice, what's the point of praying?" A young man, eyes red from tears, burned his prayer books, believing self-reliance would be enough. Each departing soul was a candle snuffed out, allowing darkness to spread. But then, amidst the storm, I saw small rays of light, faint, yet unextinguished. A young woman, her hair loosely tied, stood at the edge of the square, a rosary clutched in her hand. Her eyes were not fixed on the balcony, but on the chapel behind, where light still flickered through stained glass. She whispered the Hail Mary, her voice trembling but steady like a flame refusing to yield to the wind. An old priest, his vestments faded, held a worn Bible, standing in the middle of an empty church, his eyes tired but unwavering. He murmured, "The word of God does not change." A child in a torn coat looked up at the cloud-filled sky, as if waiting for a sign from heaven. These souls, though small, were not swept away by lies. Within them, the flame of faith still burned warm, alive. The vision expanded, like a painting unfolding before my eyes. I saw people in small apartments, their TV screens showing the speech of the false pope, but they turned it off and knelt to pray. Nuns like me, in distant monasteries, cried in the darkness, but the light from the rosary in their hands pushed back the cold. Parents, worried as their children praised the new gospel, quietly opened the Bible, rereading God's word under dim lights. They did not know one another, separated by thousands of miles, but connected by an invisible network. I saw it not the network of darkness I had once witnessed, but a network of light, shimmering like stars in the dark night. Each soul was a point of light, connected through glances, through emails sent in the night, through whispered prayers in empty churches. A gentle voice rose, like a breeze through the square. The flame of true faith cannot be extinguished. That voice, perhaps from Jesus, made my heart tremble. Even if the world is covered in dust, there will be those who see. I knelt, tears falling on the cold stone ground, not from fear, but from hope. The square still echoed with applause, but I no longer heard it. I saw only the light, small but indestructible. Do you feel the flame within you? If your heart is trembling, leave a comment below. Truth is calling, and it will lead you through the darkness. I saw the small flames unite into one great blaze, brilliant, defiant, driving back the darkness with a force I could feel in my bones. The light spread outward, unstoppable, leaping from village chapels to towering cathedrals, from whispered prayers to desperate cries, from humble hearts to the souls who had wandered furthest from the truth. Your mission, Jesus said, his voice like warm thunder in my spirit, is to speak the truth, to ignite the flame in those who are ready. I whispered, Amen, and the light wrapped itself around me like a father's embrace, steady and strong. But then, suddenly, a force pulled me. The cold returned with a vengeance. The warmth faded. I felt my body again, heavy, aching, as though I was sealed in stone beneath the weight of life itself. Coming back from the dead, is it a miracle, or is it a burden? Even a full week after awakening in the monastery infirmary, my body trembled beneath its own weight. My spirit felt loose, half-tethered, like it hadn't fully returned. The chapel bells rang each morning, but they no longer sounded like a call to worship. They felt like distant echoes, like memories from a world I had outgrown. The hymns, the prayers, the sacred rituals, once my shelter, my rhythm, my identity, now felt like someone else's liturgy, as if I had outlived the version of myself who belonged to them. One day I wandered into the monastery's garden. It was a place I once cherished, where I met God in silence. The scent of pine, moist soil, and fallen leaves stirred old comfort in me. Birds chirped overhead, their calls crisp in the still air. Yet the cold, sharp, biting pierced through my habit like needles. I knelt beside a rose bush, touched one of its withered blossoms. A thorn cut my finger. A drop of blood hit the earth. I inhaled sharply. Lord, where are you now? I whispered. But only the memory of his voice replied, You must speak. I closed my eyes, trembling. Speak to whom? And how? I feared everything: ridicule, being cast out, being disbelieved. What if no one wanted to hear the truth? On the 8th morning, just as the sun bled softly through the infirmary window, Sister Gabi entered quietly. Her hands were steady, but her voice faltered. Mother Superior wants to see you, she said, eyes downcast. They're waiting in the small meeting room. My pulse quickened. That room, so rarely used, was sacred in its own way. It was reserved for urgent matters, private judgments, and Vatican correspondence. My legs felt weak as I stood. Gabi supported me, whispering, They know you told me about what you saw. I froze. I had shared only a fragment about the throne, the falsehood, the light. Just a flicker of the vision. I should have stayed silent. The small meeting room was dimly lit, its air thick with beeswax, incense, and the weight of history. At the head of the table sat Mother Superior, her face lined with both wisdom and concern. Beside her sat Father Philip, a senior priest, cloaked in black with eyes like stone. Sister Clara sat off to the side, pen poised, blank pages before her, ready to transcribe whatever was spoken. Sister Phoebe, Mother Superior, began, her voice calm but taut. We've been told of the visions you've shared. She glanced at Father Philip, who leaned forward, his gaze piercing. You said a pope does not serve God. Those are grave accusations, he said. If this spreads, it could fracture the Church's foundation. Do you understand the consequences? I only said what I saw, I replied, my voice barely more than a breath. Mother Superior clutched her rosary. Perhaps it was only a dream, she said gently. You're still recovering. Your mind may be clouded. But Father Philip's tone sharpened. The Church cannot afford a scandal. If you speak publicly, you'll be cast as a heretic. You could be exiled. His words struck like iron. I listened as they debated my future in hushed tones. Should we report it to the Vatican? Let her rest. This must remain quiet. I sat like a ghost, present but unwelcomed. They hadn't seen what I had. They hadn't heard the weeping of the condemned. They hadn't stood at the cliff's edge between eternity and destruction. But I had, and in my soul, I still saw his eyes, Jesus, burning with truth. "You must speak," he had said. I gave no defense. I only nodded. I would speak when the time came, even if it cost me everything. When the meeting ended, the scraping of chairs on wood sounded final, like a verdict. Mother Superior laid a hand on my shoulder. "Rest, Phoebe. God will lead you." Her touch was gentle, but her eyes betrayed fear. I returned to the infirmary, but my spirit remained restless. That night, unable to sleep, I found myself in the monastery library. Candles flickered, casting golden shadows over shelves of leather-bound volumes. The air smelled of parchment and old ink. I flipped through dusty texts, prophecies, letters, forbidden histories. My fingers trembled. Some of the things I read echoed my vision, warnings of dark times, of thrones infiltrated by deception. In one ancient book, I saw the face of the false pope, the same haunting, empty eyes. My breath caught. I began to write, not to explain, not to convince, but because the truth demanded it. I wrote with urgency, with reverence, as if each word carried eternity. Not memoir, but memory. Not argument, but testimony. I didn't write for approval. I wrote because I had no choice. This world we know is a veil. Behind it, a war is raging, a war not of nations, but of spirits. A war between light and shadows, truth and deception. I have seen what cannot be unseen. I have felt perfect holiness, and I have tasted the sorrow of hell. I know now that true faith does not dwell in robes or rituals. It flickers quietly in the soul of the one who listens, who discerns, who stands when the rest kneel to lies. I am not a prophet. I am not a saint. I am simply one who saw. And I will speak. When the church trembles, who will keep the flame of faith alive? A new vision drew me into a great hall of light, not a church, but a kind of invisible sanctuary where white stone pillars engraved with strange characters shimmered under a gentle glow. The air carried the scent of long-burned incense, blended with the dry breath of Africa's red earth. Echoes resounded not of bells, but of distant drums, making my soul tremble. I floated, my heart pounding, filled with both awe and humility, as if standing before one of God's secrets. This great hall, I knew, was the image of the church, not made of stone, but of souls called to bear the light. Before me, 3 figures appeared, not ordinary believers, but cardinals, those God was watching, not because they were perfect, but because their hearts carried a fire that could illuminate the church. They stood in the light, each one a candle, connected by an invisible network, shimmering like stars in a dark night. I trembled, thinking of my monastery, of the nights spent kneeling by candlelight, wondering whether I was worthy to witness these souls. The first cardinal, Fridolin Ambongo Bizungu, Archbishop of Kinshasa, appeared in a red earth church in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The air was vibrant, drums and hymns rising, blending with the smell of dry soil and burning incense. A crowd of worshippers, clothed in vivid colors, sang aloud, their eyes shining with faith. He stood tall, like a great tree in the desert, his red robe swaying in an unseen wind. His eyes blazed like a fire in the night, and his voice rang out powerfully as he led the Mass, each word like a hammer breaking through doubt. I felt his unwavering love, not only for the church, but for his people, a people who had endured great suffering. But in his eyes, though fierce, there was a trace of worry, as if he knew that darkness was drawing near. Jesus appeared beside me, his light gentle, like a flame that never dies. His robe was white, marked with dust, as though he had walked through all the world's suffering. He looked at Cardinal Fridolin, his gaze deep, both loving and solemn. "Fridolin is a torch of hope, in a place once covered in darkness," he said, his voice rolling through my soul like a wave. "But that light will fade if it shines only for one nation, one culture, and does not open to all of humanity." His words were like a sword, not harsh, but sharp, making me shudder. I thought of the divisions within the church between continents, generations, and worship styles. I saw Cardinal Fridolin bow his head as if listening, and I prayed that this strong heart would not close from pride, but open wide to become a bridge between tradition and unity. The second cardinal, Luis Antonio Tagle, Archbishop of Manila, appeared in a warm glow, like sunrise through stained glass. I found myself in a large church in the Philippines, not solemn, but intimate, like the home of a large family. The scent of incense and fresh flowers filled the air, mingling with laughter and prayers of the faithful from poor to rich, from children to the elderly. Cardinal Tagle, with a radiant smile and sparkling eyes, stood among them, in a simple red robe, reaching out to touch a beggar, then embracing a child. Each of his gestures was like a breeze dispelling loneliness, making me feel as though I had come home. I felt his great love unconditional, unbounded, as if he longed to draw everyone closer together. Jesus stood near me, his gaze gentle but filled with irresistible power. "Luis is the embodiment of love," he said, speaking slowly, as though each word needed to sink deeply into me. "But love must be accompanied by wisdom and discernment. Love is the calling, but loving rightly is even more important." His words were like a sudden light, jolting my heart. I thought of times when love became indulgence, creating dependence instead of strength. I saw Cardinal Tagle, eyes troubled as he looked at a worshipper kneeling before him, asking for help, as if he knew his love needed more than a hug. "Help them stand on their own." Jesus continued, his voice gentle but firm. "True love is a flame not just to warm, but to light the path." I looked at Cardinal Tagle, the light around him flickering, and I prayed he would find the wisdom to lead not only with heart but with clarity. The third cardinal, Matteo Zuppi, Archbishop of Bologna, came like a soft wave, not brilliant but familiar, like an old friend. I found myself standing on a street in Bologna, the air tense, thick with smoke and dust from a protesting crowd. Shouts rang out, hands raised, faces flushed with anger. Cardinal Zuppi, his red robe faded, stood among them, his gaze full of compassion, not judgmental, not despairing. He raised his hands not to embrace, but to calm, like building an invisible bridge between divided hearts. Every word he spoke, soft yet resolute, blew away the dark clouds like a breeze. I felt his compassion not as weakness, but as strength, a desire to deliver truth through love. Jesus looked at me, his gaze serious yet full of love. "Matteo leads with the heart," he said, his voice like a gentle hammer. "But compassion must be paired with justice and resolve. To love does not mean to accept evil." His words were like a blade cutting through the fog in my mind. I thought of times when compassion had been exploited, when forgiveness became compromise, when love blurred the truth. I saw Cardinal Zuppi, his hand clenched as a protester screamed in his face, as if he were fighting to hold compassion without surrender. "To love is to protect truth," Jesus continued, his voice softer, like a reminder. "Sometimes that means standing against the dark." I looked at Cardinal Zuppi, the light around him soft yet firm, and I prayed he would hold on to justice and not let compassion dim his mission. They did not know each other, did not share time or space, but the light from each of them wove together, forming an invisible network, no leader, no hierarchy, but powerful in its silence. I knelt, my hands touching the glowing ground, warmth wrapping around my soul. I thought of the monastery, of the nights I prayed, wondering if I was strong enough. Was I also part of this network? Was my light enough to push back the dark? Jesus stepped forward, his light surrounding the small flames like fire, wrapping around candles. His robe bore traces of earth's dust, as if he had walked through every suffering of mankind. "Phoebe," his voice rang out, gentle yet piercing, "they are the ones I watch, for their hearts carry fire." I trembled, wanting to ask, but he continued, "They rebuild not with power, but with humble faith. You too are chosen, if you dare to walk." He raised his hand, and the field lit up, like flame driving out the cold. I saw thousands of other candles from across the world coming together into a sea of light, unquenchable. I rose, my soul trembling. My mission was clearer, but the darkness still waited ahead. I whispered, "Amen," as a promise to him and to myself. "Tell me, what do you feel after hearing about these cardinals? Who among them will be chosen to lead the church through the darkness? If your heart is stirring, Listen closely. Comment Amen to declare that light will always triumph. The flames I saw in that vision had not merely flickered, they had united. Small lights, like whispers of hope, converged into one mighty blaze. It surged forward, consuming the darkness not just with brilliance but with defiance. This fire was alive. It moved like breath across the landscape of faith, lighting the corners of forgotten chapels, touching the vaulted ceilings of cathedrals, leaping through the dry bones of ritual into the desperate cries of those who still yearned for truth. It did not ask for permission. It did not apologize for its brightness. It simply was holy, unstoppable, undeniable. And then he spoke. Jesus, not through thunder in the clouds or stone tablets, but directly into my spirit with a voice that warmed and shook me all at once. Your mission is to speak the truth, to ignite the flame in those who are ready. I barely managed to whisper, Amen, as light wrapped around me, like the arms of a father who had waited for his daughter to return. It held me steady and strong. But that embrace, like the vision itself, did not last. A sudden shift yanked me from the warmth, plunging me back into the cold shell of my body. The brilliance faded, the fire withdrew. I was no longer floating. I was falling back into flesh, into weight, into a world that suddenly felt far too small. The days after waking in the monastery infirmary passed like a dream beneath a veil of exhaustion. My body felt like stone, too heavy for breath. I walked as if the ground had changed its texture, unfamiliar and resistant. The chapel bells rang each morning, but instead of calling me to worship, they sounded distant, like echoes from a past life. I heard the hymns, familiar and beloved, but they no longer stirred my spirit. The prayers I once led with fervor now felt like scripts from a stage I had stepped off. I had not merely died and returned, I had crossed into something I could not unsee, and nothing in this world seemed to fit anymore. One morning I wandered into the monastery's garden. It had always been my sanctuary, a place where silence spoke and God met me among the trees and earth. The scent of pine, the cool dampness of the soil, and the sound of birdsong should have comforted me. But even there the cold reached through my habit and clung to my bones. I knelt beside a rose bush and brushed a withered bloom. A thorn pierced my skin. A drop of blood fell onto the soil, and I gasped not from pain, but from something deeper. It was as though the earth itself asked me, "Where is your faith now?" I whispered into the silence, "Lord, where are you?" And in return I heard only the memory of his voice, "You must speak." My hands trembled. Speak to whom? With what words? And what if no one believed me? On the 8th morning, as the sun bled its light through the infirmary window, Sister Gabi entered. She moved with care, but her eyes carried the weight of something unspoken. "Mother Superior wants to see you," she said, voice unsteady. "They're waiting in the small meeting room." That room was sacred in its rarity, reserved for only the most serious of matters. My stomach tightened. My hands felt numb. As I stood, Gaby gently supported me and added in a whisper, "They know you told me about what you saw." My breath caught. I had spoken only a fragment to her, a throne, a false light, a deception, but even that had been too much. I regretted my honesty. Perhaps I should have stayed silent. The room itself was cloaked in shadow and reverence. Beeswax candles flickered along the walls. The air held the scent of incense and old wood. At the head of the long table sat Mother Superior. Her face bore both kindness and caution, as if mercy and judgment warred quietly within her. Beside her was Father Philip, dressed in the deep black of clerical robes, his gaze sharp and unreadable. On the side sat Sister Clara, her pen poised, ready to record every syllable like a scribe at the gates of heaven. "Sister Phoebe," Mother Superior began, her voice gentle but taut, "we've heard of your visions." Her eyes flicked to Father Philip, who leaned forward, his tone lacking any softness. "You claimed a pope does not serve God. That is not a mere vision, it is an accusation. One that could fracture the Church's foundation if spoken aloud. Do you realize the weight of what you've said?" I barely found my voice. I only said what I saw. Mother Superior's fingers moved along her rosary beads as she replied, "Perhaps it was a dream, your body is still healing. Sometimes illness clouds our clarity." But Father Philip's face hardened. "If you speak again, you'll be branded a heretic. Do you understand? You could be removed, exiled, silenced." They spoke as though I were a threat, as though the truth itself endangered the walls they sought to protect. I listened as they debated my fate in low voices. Should we notify the Vatican? Can this be contained? She's still weak. Let her rest. I was no longer a sister among them. I was a liability, a disruption. But they had not seen what I had. They had not stood before the throne of falsehood. They had not heard the agony of the damned. They had not seen the fire in Jesus' eyes. I did not argue. I simply nodded. My silence was not surrender, it was waiting. I would speak when the time was right, even if it cost me everything. As the chairs scraped against the wood and the meeting dissolved, it felt less like a dismissal and more like a sentence. Mother Superior laid her hand on my shoulder. "Rest, Phoebe. God will lead you." Her touch was kind, but her eyes were shadowed with fear. I returned to the infirmary, but sleep would not come. That night, the weight of what I had seen pulled me to the library. By candlelight, I wandered through shelves of texts few sisters had ever opened. The air was thick with age, with ink, with secrets. I pulled volumes from the shelves, ancient prophecies, banned manuscripts, letters written in trembling hands during forgotten councils. As I read, my heart pounded. I found echoes of my vision in those pages, warnings of infiltration, of thrones seated in deception, of systems built not in the name of God, but in defiance of Him. One book, dust-covered and cracked, contained an image that froze me in place. A face. The same hollow eyes. The same cold expression. The same spirit I saw in my vision. The false pope. I began to write not out of compulsion, but necessity. I wrote not to persuade, but to testify. Each word etched into the page felt eternal. I did not write for attention. I wrote because I could not remain silent. The truth had weight, and it demanded to be carried forward. What we see is not all there is. Behind the veil of daily life, behind the ceremonies and titles, a spiritual war is raging. It is not a battle between nations. It is between light and shadow, between truth and distortion. And though I am not a prophet nor a scholar, I am a witness. And because I have seen, I must speak. In a world where even the sacred throne can be manipulated, where truth is often drowned out by spectacle, each of us is being called urgently to awaken, to lift the veil, to see not with human eyes but with spiritual discernment. Now is not the time to be passive observers. Now is the time to stand. So I ask you, who do you believe will be chosen as the next pope? Could this story, this vision, already be unfolding before our very eyes? Leave your answer in the comments below. We read every single one. You are not just a viewer, you are part of a remnant that sees clearly in a time of great confusion. You are among those whom God is calling to watch, to pray, and to speak. If your spirit has been stirred, if you felt a divine nudge as you read these words, I invite you to respond. Click the super thanks button, the heart icon below this video, and offer a gift if you feel led. Whether it's as humble as the widow's 2 coins or something greater, your offering is seen by heaven. It fuels this mission, helping us shine light into places choked by deception. From silent monasteries to noisy city streets, your support carries further than you can imagine. Every gift, every prayer, every comment is not just a gesture, it's a declaration. You don't have to be a preacher to change the world. A whispered prayer, a shared video, A single act of generosity. These are the bricks that rebuild the church in truth. And because of courageous hearts like yours, hearts that refuse to be lulled into silence, we press on. We expose false thrones. We call wandering souls back to the light. And we do so with confidence that God will honor your boldness, reward your faith, and use your voice in ways you may never fully see this side of eternity. And God will bless you for it.